A midnight piano confession, unspoken love, and trembling hearts. Bruno and Rosé collide in a cinematic moment where music tells the truth. "Don't stop," Rosé whispered into the dark, her voice breaking just as the final chord shattered the silence. The sound of the piano was still trembling in the air when Bruno's fingers froze above the keys, the room breathing with them, the city outside holding its breath. Midnight had slipped past unnoticed, and the studio lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow, casting long shadows across the walls like secrets that refused to stay hidden. The melody he had been playing was unfinished, raw, aching, dangerous, and it had found its way into her chest before she could protect herself. Bruno didn't turn around. He couldn't. Not yet. His shoulders rose and fell as if he were surfacing from deep water, and Rosé could see the familiar habit she had learned without trying. When his heart raced, he pressed his thumb into the edge of the piano bench, grounding himself, steadying the storm inside. The piano smelled faintly of old wood and polish, a comforting scent that had always meant safety to him. Tonight, it felt like a confession chamber. He had started playing because he couldn't sleep. She had followed the sound because she couldn't forget. The melody had come out of him like a wound reopening, slow, deliberate notes that carried the weight of everything he had never said. Each chord leaned toward longing, toward restraint, toward the ache of wanting something you're not sure you're allowed to have. Rosé stood a few steps behind him, her hand gripping the doorframe, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it over the piano. "Why are you here?" he finally asked, still not turning, his voice low and hoarse. She laughed softly, a sound that trembled. "You know why." He did. That was the problem. They had spent months orbiting each other, on tour schedules that never quite aligned, in studios that smelled like coffee and rain, in hallways filled with laughter that stopped the moment the door closed behind them. There had been looks held too long, conversations cut short, hands brushing and pulling away too quickly. Each of them carried private fears like hidden bruises. Bruno feared breaking what little piece he had carved out after years of chaos and expectations. Rosé feared becoming another beautiful song people listened to, but never truly heard. He played again, softer this time. The notes were gentler, almost apologetic, like fingertips tracing a memory. Rosé felt her throat tighten. She had heard him play 1,000 times, but never like this. Never when the music sounded like it was breathing with him, like it was saying her name without daring to speak it. She took a step closer. The floor creaked and he flinched. "Bruno," she said, barely more than a breath. "That melody, it hurts." "That's how I know it's honest," he replied. He finally turned, and the look on his face stole the air from her lungs. His eyes were glossy, unguarded, stripped of the charm he used as armor. This was the Bruno who stayed up too late rewriting lyrics because one word felt wrong. The Bruno who laughed easily but felt deeply. The Bruno who loved like it was a risk he took every time, knowing the cost. "I wrote it for a moment that hasn't happened," he said. "For something I keep walking away from." Rosé swallowed. Her hands were shaking now, a nervous habit she hated. "Maybe it hasn't happened because you won't let it." Silence stretched between them, thick and electric. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly washing the room in white before disappearing again. Bruno looked at the piano, then at her, torn between safety and truth. "My whole life," he said slowly, "I've learned how to say the right thing, how to turn feelings into hooks, into melodies people can sing along to without bleeding." He stood up, the bench scraping softly against the floor. "But when it comes to you, every word feels like a lie." Her chest ached. "Then don't use words." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the faint scent of coffee. Close enough to feel the heat of him. Close enough that running would hurt more than staying. So he sat back down and played. The melody shifted, opening up, revealing its core. It swelled with longing, dipped into vulnerability, then rose again with a fragile hope that made Rosé's eyes burn. She closed them, letting the sound wash over her, letting it touch the places she kept hidden. Memories surfaced, late-night conversations, shared laughter, the way he listened to her like every word mattered. When the final note faded, she was crying openly now, tears slipping down her cheeks without shame. She reached out before she could stop herself, her hand finding his shoulder. He leaned into the touch instinctively, as if he had been waiting for it all along. "I felt that," she whispered, "every second of it." He covered her hand with his own, his fingers warm and steady despite the chaos inside him. "That's all I wanted," he said, "for you to feel it, even if nothing else happens." She moved around him, standing between him and the piano now, forcing him to look up at her. Her eyes were red, her smile fragile but real. "You think I've been standing this close to you all this time for nothing?" The question hung there, dangerous and beautiful. He stood slowly, as if afraid the moment might break. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling, the world narrowing to the space between them. Bruno's fear was still there, fear of headlines, of loss, of loving too deeply. But it was quieter now, drowned out by the certainty thrumming in his chest. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "So am I," she said, "but I'm more terrified of pretending this doesn't exist." He wrapped his arms around her then, a careful, reverent embrace that spoke of restraint and devotion all at once. She melted into him, her cheek against his chest, listening to his heartbeat find its rhythm again. The piano loomed behind them, silent now, its job done. They stayed like that for a long time, not kissing, not rushing, just holding on as if the night itself might slip away if they let go. When they finally pulled back, there was no need for promises or declarations. The truth had already been spoken, carried on a melody that would linger long after the keys had cooled. Bruno glanced at the piano one last time and smiled softly. "Some songs," he said, "are only meant to be heard by one person." Rosé squeezed his hand, her heart still trembling but steady in its certainty. "Then I'll listen," she replied, "as long as you keep playing." The door closed behind them with a soft click, but the sound felt explosive in the silence that followed. "You shouldn't have held me like that," Rosé said first, pulling her hand free, her voice sharp not with anger but with fear barely contained. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to me?" Bruno turned, eyes dark, jaw tight. "I could ask you the same thing. You walked into that room knowing exactly what would happen if you stayed." "That's not fair," she shot back. "I followed the music, not you." He laughed once, bitter and low. "That melody didn't come out of nowhere. It came out because you're here, because every time you look at me like that, I forget how to be careful." The air between them crackled. Rosé crossed her arms, a habit she had when she felt cornered, when emotions threatened to spill faster than she could control. "Careful," she repeated. "You've been hiding behind that word for months. Careful is just another way of saying afraid." His expression hardened. "And reckless is just another way of saying selfish." The words hit harder than either of them expected. Rosé's breath caught, her eyes flashing. "Selfish," she said quietly. "You think it's selfish to want honesty, to want you to look at me and not pretend I'm just another collaboration." Bruno stepped closer, invading her space, his voice dropping. "Don't do that. Don't pretend you don't know what this would turn into if we cross that line." Her pulse jumped, but she didn't step back. "Then say it," she challenged. "Say what you're so afraid of." He hesitated, and that pause was louder than any confession. His hands clenched at his sides, the familiar internal war raging across his face. "I'm afraid," he said finally, each word dragged out like it cost him something, "that once I let myself want you out loud, I won't know how to stop. And the world doesn't forgive that." Rosé's voice softened, but the intensity didn't fade. "The world doesn't get to decide what we feel. It does when it turns feelings into headlines," he snapped. "When it twists moments like tonight into something ugly. You think they'll hear the music, or will they just hear scandal?" She looked away, blinking hard. "So that's it," she said. "You'd rather silence the truth than risk the noise." "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you're saying." She turned back to him, eyes shining, unflinching. "You play a song that tears me open, you hold me like I'm the only thing keeping you standing, and then you want to pretend it ends there." His voice broke. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" she demanded. "From being seen with you, from loving you." The word hung between them, naked and dangerous. Bruno's breath stuttered. For a moment, he looked like he might step back, retreat into the safe distance he knew so well. Instead, he reached out, stopping just short of touching her cheek, his hand hovering as if crossing that final inch might shatter everything. "You don't know what you're asking," he whispered. Rosé leaned into the space between his hand and her skin, her voice trembling but fierce. "I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to stop hiding behind the piano." That did it. His hand finally touched her, fingers brushing her cheek, tentative at first, then firmer, like he was memorizing the feel of her. "I've written songs about heartbreak, about loss," he said softly, "but I've never been this scared of a feeling before." She swallowed. "Good, that means it matters." A sudden vibration shattered the moment. Bruno pulled back sharply as his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and something dark crossed his face. "What is it?" Rosé asked, her stomach tightening. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was cold. "Someone recorded part of the rehearsal downstairs, the piano, us." Her heart dropped. "What do you mean recorded?" "I mean it's already being sent around," he said. "And if that's out there, it won't take long before they start asking why you were here at midnight, with me." Silence fell, heavier than before. Rosé laughed weakly, disbelief creeping in. "So this is how it happens," she murmured. "Not because we said something wrong, but because someone decided to listen when they weren't supposed to." Bruno ran a hand through his hair, packing now. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." She stepped in front of him, stopping him mid-stride. "Look at me," she said. When he did, she held his gaze, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "If they already have the music, then hiding won't erase it. The only question is whether we let fear write the ending." He searched her face, seeing not just vulnerability but resolve. "You're ready to burn for this?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I already am." Outside, distant sirens wailed, the city restless and awake, as if sensing the shift. Bruno exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling into something irrevocable. "Then stay," he said at last. "At least tonight. If everything changes tomorrow, I don't want to regret running away again." Rosé didn't hesitate. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his, her touch grounding and electric all at once. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "But this time, you don't get to play alone." He looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded. Behind them, the piano waited, silent but knowing, as the first sparks of controversy, desire, and undeniable truth began to ignite beyond the walls, threatening to turn one midnight melody into a storm neither of them could outrun. The city didn't sleep, but the studio felt sealed off from the world, as if time itself had decided to pause and watch them unravel. "You're shaking," Bruno said, his thumb brushing over Rosé's knuckles as if testing whether she was real or a memory he'd invented to survive lonely nights. "Because I'm angry," she replied, pulling her hand back just enough to breathe, her eyes blazing. "And because part of me is terrified you'll change your mind the second the sun comes up." He flinched. "I won't." "You say that now," she shot back. "You always sound brave in the dark." The words sliced deeper than she intended. Bruno turned away, leaning against the piano, his head dropping forward as if the weight of everything unsaid had finally become too heavy. "You think this is easy for me," he said, his voice rough. "I've spent years building walls strong enough to survive fame, expectations, the noise, and you walk in and suddenly none of it works anymore." Rosé stepped closer, refusing to let him retreat. "I didn't ask to be the one who breaks your walls," she said quietly. "I just asked you not to lie to me about what's already broken." He laughed under his breath, a sound edged with pain. "That's the problem, you see me too clearly." She reached out again, this time pressing her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. He froze. "It's loud," she whispered, "even when you're silent." For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension between them wasn't gentle. It was volatile, built from restraint and longing stretched too thin. Bruno's hand came up, hovering near her waist, then stopping, as if waiting for permission he was afraid to ask for. "Say something," Rosé murmured, "before I lose the nerve to stand here." He lifted his head, eyes dark, intense. If I say what I'm thinking, we don't go back from it. Good, she said. I'm tired of going back. His breath hitched. I think about you when I'm on stage, he admitted, the words spilling faster now. When the lights are blinding and the crowd is screaming my name, I still feel alone. And then I imagine you watching, not as a fan, not as a headline, but as someone who knows me when the music stops. Her eyes softened, even as tears gathered. You think I don't do the same, she replied. Every time I sing a note that hurts, I wonder if you'd hear it differently than everyone else. He stepped closer, closing the distance until there was barely air between them. That scares me, he said, because it means you matter more than the songs. She tilted her head up, defiant and vulnerable all at once. Then let me matter. A sudden knock at the door shattered the moment. They both jumped. Bruno cursed under his breath, tension snapping tight again. No one's supposed to be here, he muttered. The knock came again, firmer this time. Bruno, a voice called from the other side. We need to talk now. Rosé's heart pounded. Who is that? His jaw clenched. Management. The door opened before either of them could respond. A man stepped in, eyes sharp, already calculating. His gaze flicked from Bruno to Rosé and lingered there, cold with recognition. So it's true, he said flatly. I hoped the rumor was exaggerated. Rosé straightened, lifting her chin. Rumor, she echoed. There's audio circulating, the man continued, ignoring her. A piano track, very intimate. People are already speculating. Bruno moved instinctively, placing himself slightly in front of her. You don't get to interrogate her. The man raised an eyebrow. You think this is about interrogation. This is about damage control. Rosé's voice trembled, but she didn't back down. Damage to who? To brands, to images, to careers, he replied. You're both valuable, separately. The implication hung heavy. Bruno's fists clenched. And together. The man's silence was answer enough. Rosé laughed softly, the sound brittle. So that's it, she said. You hear music and call it a threat. I hear liability, he corrected. And I'm here to make sure this doesn't become a story we can't contain. Bruno's voice was dangerously calm. You're too late. The man's eyes narrowed. Think carefully. One wrong step and this stops being poetic. Rosé felt something settle inside her then, a quiet, fierce clarity. She stepped around Bruno, meeting the man's gaze head-on. You can control narratives, she said. You can't control what's true. The room went still. Bruno looked at her, stunned, something like awe flickering across his face. The man exhaled sharply, irritation flashing before it was buried behind professionalism. This isn't over, he said, turning toward the door. You'll both hear from me. When the door closed, the silence returned, heavier than before. Rosé's shoulders sagged as the adrenaline drained from her body. This is where you tell me he's right, she said quietly, that we should stop. Bruno crossed the room in 2 strides and took her face in his hands, his touch firm, grounding. No, he said. This is where I tell you I'm done letting other people decide what I'm allowed to feel. Her breath caught. Are you sure? He rested his forehead against hers. I've never been more sure of anything. Tears slipped down her cheeks and he brushed them away with his thumbs, tender despite the chaos. Then don't disappear on me, she whispered. Not tomorrow, not when it gets loud. I won't, he promised, even if it costs me. She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him fully now, her body finally surrendering to the truth they'd been circling for so long. The piano stood silent behind them, witness to a night that had already crossed every line it was supposed to respect. Outside, the city roared on, unaware that somewhere above the noise, 2 hearts had collided hard enough to change everything, whether the world was ready for it or not. Morning arrived without mercy. Sunlight crept through the tall studio windows, pale and intrusive, exposing everything the night had protected. Rosé woke first, disoriented, the weight of reality settling on her chest before she even opened her eyes. She was still fully dressed, curled on the couch with a thin blanket that smelled like Bruno, Coffee, wood, something warm and familiar. For a moment, she let herself pretend the world hadn't changed. Then she heard his voice. They already know. Bruno was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, posture rigid. He wasn't angry. That scared her more. He sounded controlled, the way he did when he was bracing for impact. No, he said quietly. We didn't confirm anything. That doesn't mean you get to spin it however you want. Rosé sat up slowly, her heart pounding harder with every word she caught. Bruno turned slightly, catching her eyes, and whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. I said no, he repeated into the phone, sharper now. If you leak that, you're crossing a line you can't walk back from. A pause, then a bitter smile tugged at his mouth. You always say that. He ended the call and exhaled, dragging a hand down his face. The silence that followed was suffocating. They're pushing, he said finally. Rosé swung her legs off the couch. How bad? Bad enough that my team wants a denial before noon. He looked at her, really looked at her, and his voice dropped. They want me to say you were just there to listen, that the song wasn't about anything personal. Her chest tightened. And what do you want? The question hung between them, heavier than any headline. Bruno hesitated, and in that hesitation, Rosé felt every old fear resurface. She stood, arms crossing over her chest like armor. Say it, she urged, though her voice shook. If you want me to disappear, just say it. He closed the distance between them in 3 long steps. Don't, he said. Don't put words in my mouth. Then stop looking at me like I'm a problem you're trying to solve. That hit him. His eyes darkened, frustration flashing. You think I don't see what this is doing to you? He shot back. You think I don't hear the way they talk about you already? She laughed, sharp and humorless. Welcome to my world. The words stunned him into silence. Rosé stepped closer, her voice rising, years of swallowed resentment breaking through. They've been dissecting my every move since I was a teenager. I've learned to survive it. What I didn't expect was you being afraid of standing next to me. I'm not afraid of you, he said fiercely. Then what are you afraid of? She demanded. Losing control, losing your image, or losing the excuse that keeps you safe. He stared at her, breathing hard. I'm afraid that if I choose you out loud, they'll tear you apart just to punish me for it. Her anger faltered, replaced by something rower. You don't get to protect me by erasing me. That landed differently. Bruno's shoulders sagged slightly, the fight draining out of him. I know, he said hoarsely, and I hate that I even considered it. His phone buzzed again, vibrating on the table like a ticking bomb. He didn't look at it. Rosé took a deep breath. Then listen to me, she said, her tone steady now, resolute. I'm not asking for a press conference. I'm not asking for promises you can't keep. I'm asking you not to lie. He met her gaze. If I don't deny it, he said slowly, this becomes a story whether we like it or not. And if you do deny it, she replied, this becomes a wound. The honesty in her voice undid him more than any argument could have. He reached for her, stopping himself halfway, then dropping his hand as if the restraint physically hurt. I don't want to hurt you, he said. She stepped into him, closing the space herself, her hand gripping the front of his shirt. Then don't. For a moment, the world narrowed again to the two of them. He could feel her pulse under his fingers when he finally allowed himself to touch her arm. She could feel his tension, the constant battle between instinct and fear. I wrote that song because I couldn't say your name, he admitted softly. Because saying it felt like a promise I wasn't sure I deserved to make. Her voice broke. You don't have to deserve feelings. You just have to tell the truth about them. A knock echoed from the hallway, louder this time, urgent. Bruno didn't turn. They're here, he said quietly. My team. Rosé's stomach dropped, but she didn't step away. What are you going to tell them? He looked at her like he was memorizing her face, like this moment might define everything that came after. Then, slowly, he straightened. I'm going to tell them the song came from somewhere real, he said, and that I won't deny that. Her breath caught. That's not a full confession. It's not a lie either. The door opened, voices spilling in, tension flooding the room. Questions flew, controlled, strategic, sharp. Bruno listened, nodded, then raised a hand to stop them. "I'm not issuing a denial," he said calmly. The room froze. Rosé watched from the side, heart in her throat as shock rippled across their faces. Someone protested. Someone warned. Bruno didn't flinch. "That melody," he continued, "is personal. I won't explain it, and I won't pretend it doesn't matter." The silence that followed was electric, dangerous. When the meeting finally broke apart, nothing was resolved. Nothing was safe, but something had shifted. Later, when they were alone again, Rosé leaned against the piano, exhausted. "You realize this changes everything?" Bruno nodded. "Yeah." She studied him, searching for regret. She didn't find it. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He stepped closer, his voice low, unwavering. "No, I regret every time I stayed silent before." Her eyes filled again, but this time she didn't fight it. "Then whatever comes," she said, "we face it knowing we didn't betray ourselves." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together openly, deliberately. "Together," he agreed. Outside, phones buzzed, rumors ignited, and the first headlines began to form. Inside the quiet room, beside the piano that had started it all, they stood trembling, not from fear alone, but from the terrifying, undeniable clarity of choosing truth over comfort. The first headline broke before noon. Rosé saw it on Bruno's phone before he could turn the screen away, the bold letters burning themselves into her memory like a brand. Speculation, insider sources, a melody at midnight that crossed professional lines. Her name was already there, dissected, bent into something sharp. "So this is it," she said quietly. "This is how they tell our story." Bruno's jaw tightened. "They don't get to tell it alone." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw the cost settling into his posture. The easy confidence he wore on stage was gone, replaced by something heavier but truer. "You're about to walk into a storm," she said, "with me attached to your name." He stepped closer, voice low, fierce. "I walked into it the moment I played that song." The calls started coming in waves. Managers, publicists, friends who sounded worried even when they pretended to be supportive. Each conversation pulled at him, tried to reframe the night as a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a harmless collaboration. Rosé listened from the other side of the room, feeling herself reduced to a variable in equations she never agreed to solve. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Stop," she said sharply. Bruno ended the call mid-sentence. The room went still. "You keep talking like I'm a risk you need to manage," she continued, her voice trembling with restraint. "If that's what this is going to be, tell me now." His eyes snapped to hers. "That's not what I'm doing." "It feels like it," she said. "Like I'm standing beside you while everyone decides how dangerous I am to your life." He crossed the room in 2 strides. "No," he said, gripping the back of a chair as if to anchor himself. "What I'm doing is choosing how much of myself I'm willing to lose to keep things easy." "And?" she asked. He met her gaze without flinching. "I'm done losing." Her breath caught. "Say that again." "I'm done hiding behind silence," he said. "I'm done pretending the music exists in a vacuum. I won't let them erase you from it." Tears burned her eyes, but anger still simmered beneath them. "Then don't protect me from the truth," she said. "Stand in it with me." The next meeting was brutal. They sat across from a polished table, voices calm but sharp, words chosen like weapons. Strategies were proposed, boundaries suggested. A carefully worded statement hovered on a screen, designed to diffuse curiosity without confirming anything real. Bruno listened, then stood. "I won't sign this," he said. The room froze. "This doesn't deny," someone argued. "It just redirects." "It lies by omission," he replied evenly, "and I won't build my future on that." Rosé felt her heart hammer as eyes turned to her. For the first time, no one spoke over her. "This isn't a scandal," she said quietly. "It's 2 people who heard the same truth in the same room." Silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. One of them sighed. "You're asking for chaos." Bruno's voice was calm, unwavering. "I'm choosing honesty." When it was over, when the doors finally closed and the world outside rushed back in, Rosé felt strangely lightheaded. "You didn't have to do that," she said as they walked out into the corridor. "You could have softened it." He stopped, turning to face her. "I didn't play that song to soften anything." They stood there, exposed and unguarded, knowing the next days would be louder, crueler, relentless. And yet, for the first time, neither of them felt alone in it. That night, the piano waited again. Bruno sat, fingers hovering over the keys, hesitating. "I don't know how to write this part," he admitted. "The part where everything's out in the open." Rosé moved closer, resting her hand on the edge of the piano. "Then don't write it yet," she said. "Just play what's true." He did. The melody was different now, stronger, less afraid. It carried the ache of risk and the quiet power of choosing anyway. Rosé closed her eyes, letting it wash over her, feeling every note settle where doubt used to live. When he finished, the silence felt earned. She stepped into him, wrapping her arms around his waist, her head against his chest. He held her back just as tightly, no hesitation left. "No matter how they twist this," she murmured, "this moment is ours." He kissed the top of her head, a simple, devastatingly tender gesture. "So is the truth," he said. Days later, the noise was deafening. Opinions clashed. Fans speculated. The world tried to claim ownership of a story that had started in the quietest hour of the night. But sometimes, between interviews and rehearsals, Bruno would sit at the piano and play that melody again. And Rosé would listen, smiling softly, knowing that some confessions didn't need permission, didn't need approval, didn't need to be shouted to be real. Because when the piano spoke that night, it spoke more honestly than words ever could. And they chose to listen.